You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Dr. Joshua Lindell. I'm a... Fuck. I'm Dr. Joshua Lindell. I am a paleoanthropologist studying Neanderthals, and I'm here with...
I'm Dr. Kimberly Plomp. I'm a bioarchaeologist. I study the human skeleton, health and disease, and evolution.
And I'm Dr. Ross Barnett, paleogeneticist studying phylogenetics of extinct cats.
And today we are reviewing the first episode of a TV series called Korg 70,000 BC from 1974. This was apparently a Hanna-Barbera production, even though it's a live-action series. I didn't realize Hanna-Barbera did any live-action shows. Sounds like they were, at some point, thinking shifting to live-action was going to be their big thing. And then this series did one season, and then I guess they never tried that again.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. Because, it was good.
This is not that... Yeah, this is for a 1970s Saturday morning show. This would have been something I'm sure I would have watched if I was alive in 1974.
Totally.
The episode is called The Blind Hunter. This is episode 1 of this series. So who wants to summarize this episode for us?
I can give it a go.
I mean, nothing happens, so...
Yeah.
Nothing happens.
I mean, how could you say that, Kim? Lots happens. A guy is blind and then he's a bit not blind.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sort of suffers from any kind of pilot episode in that you've got to somehow introduce everyone and get them known to the audience, which this sort of manages. So it's classic kind of cave person story, uncommon for the kind of things that we watch. It's actually got a date that corresponds to the right time period for the people it's talking about. So it's set 72,000 years ago, which is kind of the last hurrah of the Neanderthals. They go extinct about 40,000 years ago, so that tallies. That's nice. They're allowed to speak English, so they don't grunt. They have complex language. They have complex human emotions. They have autonomy, they have direction, they have advanced thought. So that's all very nice, and that's something that kind of disappears for much of the 80s and 90s, treating Neanderthals as humans. But we open with quite a 70s kind of horn intro to set the scene. We meet some of the Neanderthals. They get names as well, which is quite nice. I mean, they're all classic Neanderthal-style names, single syllables with lots of consonants. But we have like Korg and Tor and Kor and Torg. I don't know. I mean, yeah, Bok. They all sound like onomatopoeic terms that a chicken might use. But anyway, we see them. They have quite good prosthetics, so they definitely have a brow ridge. They have tailored clothes. They have shoes. So that's showing kind of the sewing technology. They have hafted composite spears, so that's also quite good. We don't get any close-ups on their lithics, so I guess we don't get to see whether they have properly Mysterian points or not. But they live in a family kind of unit. It's not particularly explained how everyone relates to everyone else, but there are some kids, some parents, and some other adults. We also see a bit of their environment in the opening credits. So they live amongst African elephants, which is interesting considering they're Neanderthals. We can come back to that point later on. Also tigers, again, interesting considering they're meant to be kind of northern Eurasian. Lions, okay, they get over that one. And first of all, we meet a hunter. And we know he's a hunter because he's got a spear and he's a man. And he's walking along, and first thing he does is fall over a branch. And I thought this was quite a clever sort of setup. So they sort of show him falling over this obvious sort of tree branch on the ground. And my first thoughts were, oh, these are going to be idiot Neanderthals. They're going to be, just sort of subhumans, unable to do anything, doing pratfalls, and it's going to be that kind of show. But no, we get a voiceover from no less than Burgess Meredith, who has a very distinctive voice, but who I always think of as Penguin from the Batman 66 series. That's who he's going to be. But he has a very kind of actor voice, and he explains, actually, this Neanderthal is a hunter who's been mauled by a bear while out hunting and fallen off a cliff edge and banged his head, and so he's actually blind. So he's not stupid. He's not a stupid Neanderthal. He's just blind, helpless, and lost. We'd also see that he speaks English. So the language of the Neanderthals is pretty much standard English. I think they do kind of simplify it a little bit, but it is intelligible and makes sense and has syntax. And we see a Neanderthal boy kind of near the hunter, and he's called Tor. And the blind hunter shouts out, "Help me, boy!" And he eventually kind of captures Tor and forces him to act as a guide. And while this drama is going on, we kind of return to the home cave where we see some of Tor's relatives. So we see a nice bit of kind of family dynamic. So there's Tor's siblings are kind of play fighting with each other, kind of tripping each other up and wrestling, just as any kind of Homo sapiens family does in the year 2025. We see them kind of hunting, but also gathering. So that at one point they're kind of preparing vegetables to cook. It looks like a celeriac. Obviously, that's a domesticate, but it stands in for, I guess, the kind of tubers that Neanderthals would have eaten. And we kind of cut between the cave and Tor and the blind hunter. So the blind hunter has tied a leather strap around Tor to stop him from escaping, and wants Tor to guide him back to his own cave, to his own land. And while they're back at the cave, they realize that Tor is missing. Two of the adult men go out to track him, and again they're showing a successful, intelligent humans. So they're tracking Tor and the blind hunter from their trail, and they're doing a very good job of it. So they're kind of following exactly in the footsteps of Tor and the blind hunter. So that's interesting. We hear a bit more about what happened to the blind hunter. So apparently he was out hunting with his brother when they came across a bear, and the bear clawed the brother as well. We don't know if the brother's dead, but the hunter has lost his sight through a concussion or something similar. And they've been walking for most of the day. So now it's almost nighttime, and the blind hunter and Tor have to kind of find somewhere to stay for the night. And so they kind of huddle together for warmth because they don't have any extra furs, and they don't have the means to make a fire or anything like that at the time. And we get kind of more kind of back and forth to Tor's cave, about his mother, who comes across as very sympathetic, very human. The next day, Tor's relatives are continuing their trailing, and the blind hunter and Tor are continuing their path back to the blind hunter's cave. They find some berries because the blind hunter is hungry, and while they're kind of scavenging for berries, Tor notices that there's some heavy rocks, and it's a bit like Chekhov's gun. You think, okay, what's a cave person going to do with some rocks? Obviously, he's going to use that rock to hit the blind guy over the head, but he doesn't. He doesn't manage to reach them in time, and the blind hunter feels some rocks and works out that Tor was going to brain him again to try and escape. But they've kind of crossed into the blind hunter's homeland, which is beside the river. He's part of the river people. And while they're going along the river, guiding them back to the blind hunter's cave, Tor manages to wrap the cord, I think, around a tree, so that he now has a bit of a chance to escape, which he takes. So he kind of breaks the leather thong that's tying him to the blind hunter and runs off, but only a little bit, because the blind hunter realizes he's now alone again and sort of flails around a bit and falls into the river. And obviously, being blind and being one of the river people, that's a massive problem. You know, it's about sort of 2 foot deep, but for dramatic reasons, he kind of starts to drown. And Tor is conflicted. He kind of uses his voice to guide the blind hunter back to the bank. We get a kind of perspective from the blind hunter's point of view, and his sight is starting to return. So he's kind of getting better. So he can make out kind of blurry images, which
it's like the shock of the water brought it back, right?
Yeah. the fall kind of fixed it. And so this kind of absolves Tor from any kind of guilt of leaving him behind. He can see a bit now. But he still shouts for help and pretends to be more blind than he is. And that causes Tor to hesitate. But he watches him carefully and he sees that the blind hunter steps daintily over another log. And so Tor figures out, oh, he can actually see. He's just trying to trick me. But just as the blind, or I guess he's just the hunter now, the semi-blind hunter is about to grab Tor again. His family turn up. And there's a bit of a standoff. They've got spears. He's got Tor. So they're kind of in a hostage situation. And it's a standoff. But the semi-blind hunter says, I would not hurt this boy. And Tor kind of encourages his family just to leave him be. And they agree to take the semi-blind hunter. We will take you till we see the smoke of your camp and walk him back. And so they kind of end on that. There's a bit of kind of exposition from Burgess Meredith about how this is all based on scientific fact. It could have happened. We don't have any Neanderthal writings, which is, true, very true. But it's nice, and I think they have a really good portrayal of this Neanderthal family. They're complex, they're sensitive, they have empathy, they have understanding of different people's points of view. It is a really sort of sensitive depiction of prehistoric humans, which is impressive by its rarity in terms of the films and TV shows that we've watched. And we see at the end as well, the credits, that actually there is some scientific input into the creation of the series. So they have people from the American Museum of Natural History, the Los Angeles Museum of Natural History. It's kind of partly funded by the National Education Society. And there's also somebody from the Fuller Theological Seminary in there as well. A bit of a kind of outlier, maybe for the moral dimension of the show. But yeah, there are people with actual doctorates in actual science and paleoanthropology have contributed to this, which I guess makes it better than many of the other things that we've watched.
Better scientifically, but pretty boring.
Yes, just people wandering.
If I knew that this episode was going to have so little plot or content, I would have suggested we watch a few more episodes so we had a little more to talk about. So based on this one episode, where basically we just sort of walk through the forest for a little bit, or probably through a park in Los Angeles, what can we find to sort of direct our conversation in particular in this episode?
Well, one of the things I noticed was that it tends to be fairly kind of geography neutral. So you don't see any particularly, apart from in the opening credits where you have a kind of mishmash of creatures. But the soundscape is fairly neutral, apart from, and this is a thing that many, I guess, would be Foley artists, sound recordists. They've thrown in some kookaburra in there. So at some point you get kookaburra laughing. And, Australian kingfishers are not something you're going to hear in either, prehistoric European Neanderthal times or even in prehistoric Los Angeles times. This is not something that anyone with an interest in zoology is going to let slide. So that's not great.
Yeah, we have surprisingly few animals in this episode. We've got, other than that, just the ones in the intro credits. So we don't even have that much to go on there.
And the sheep or whatever kind of animal it is that they hunt that we only see kind of strung upside down. I think it's a sheep.
I thought it was a white-tailed deer, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I thought it was a deer.
All right. Okay, it could have been a deer then. But yeah, it might be worth talking about the animals in the intro. So Neanderthals are Eurasian, so they have a kind of range from southern Spain through to southern Siberia. And everywhere in between. So they would have encountered cave lions quite commonly. So having African lion in there, that's fine. I think the lion they show is a male, so it has a mane. But we know that cave lions didn't have manes, so I'll give them a partial credit for that. Tigers, yeah, they probably would have encountered tigers towards the easternmost part of their range. So like around, they might have found Caspian tigers. So kind of around the Caspian Sea, kind of Western Russia, Siberian tigers as well, possibly would have overlapped depending on how far south the Neanderthals came. African elephants, no. They wouldn't have found African elephants, but they would have overlapped with something called Paleoloxodon, Paleoloxodon antiquus, which is found over quite a lot of Neanderthal range. It's a Eurasian proboscidean. And interestingly, it was huge, bigger than African elephants today, but it used to be thought of as a relative of the Asian elephant, something similar to a kind of hairless mammoth, I guess. But some recent genetic work in the past sort of 10 or so years has shown that, weirdly, Paleoloxodon has a DNA signature, at least mitochondrially, that groups it with African forest elephants. So there's two species of African elephant. There's the forest elephant and the savanna elephant. Very subtle distinctions between them, but they group genetically distinctly. And Paleoloxodon groups with the forest elephants, which is an African species. So that's quite interesting. But when people did more work on the nuclear genome, they see that this is something that has happened quite a lot in Pleistocene mammals. So this African elephant signature is a sign of hybridization in Paleoloxodon's past. So you have the ancestor of the modern day forest elephant interbred with the ancestor of Paleoloxodon. But actually the sort of family tree of the elephants puts Paleoloxodon somewhere essentially in the middle of the fork between the Asian elephants and the African elephants. So it is more different than mitochondrial DNA would suggest. The nuclear genome sort of gives a better answer. But yeah, so you would have had, if not an African elephant, you would have had African elephant DNA in the same place at the same time as Neanderthals.
That's interesting. I'm sure that we've talked about this before, but if I'm not mistaken, like woolly mammoths are more closely related to Asian elephants than African elephants.
Yeah.
Which, when we talk about like genetic relatedness of different species, I think some people have trouble getting their head around it sometimes. But what that means is that also the Asian elephant is more closely related to woolly mammoths than it is to the African elephant. Mm-hmm. And so people seem to tend to think of elephants as one thing and mammoths as sort of a similar but separate thing. But mammoths are just a type of elephant that's sort of embedded within the living elephant family tree, right?
Totally. In the same way that giant pandas are a kind of bear that's nestled in the bear family tree, or humans are a kind of ape that's nestled in the ape family tree. That's the same kind of phylogenetic thinking.
Yeah, that's one of the things people have a lot of trouble getting their head around. I put this question on a lot of my tests. Humans' closest living relative is the chimpanzee. What's the chimpanzee's closest living relative? And then they always say like gorilla, orangutan, stuff like that. But like, no, it has to be human because that's how relatedness works, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
totally.
I'm stealing that question for my exams.
Yeah, definitely. It's one thing that once you get, once you sort of get introduced to phylogenetics and know the difference between a branch and a node, the idea that nodes are freely rotatable, like they are directionless, they're just sort of pivot points that you can flip everything around, then everything becomes a lot easier. And so you can see that if chimps and humans are each other's closest relatives, then that means that the distance from human to chimp is the same as from chimp to human.
That's interesting. That's making me visualize a sort of three-dimensional model of a tree where we can just rotate the nodes.
Yeah. Like a mobile. Mm-hmm. But then I guess you have to be careful with that question, Josh, because if you might have some smart Alex in your class who say that bonobos are chimps' closest relatives.
Yeah, well, if they write that answer in, they'll get full marks for it.
But you can say pan, like what is pan's closest relative?
Yeah. Pan being the genus of chimpanzees and bonobos.
I think what I found interesting about the show, well, I've used the term interesting very loosely, is
comparatively interesting.
Just the only thing I could think of to bring up when I was watching it is that the outsider, like the blind guy, he spoke in kind of a broken way in that stereotypical Neanderthal movie way, but the other ones didn't. The main family didn't. They spoke in full sentences. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know if that was like character choice based by the actor or if it was supposed to be that he's an outsider and there's like different dialects, or if they were just trying to, in a way that's not quite as obvious, just make him seem more of an outsider. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
What do we think about the prosthetics? Because they've got brow ridges. I think some of them have fake teeth, but it seems like some of them didn't.
I mean, everyone in Hollywood's got fake teeth these days, so...
It seems like some of them have teeth over top of their real teeth.
Yeah. I would say that they're probably, like, they're definitely not the worst. We've seen worse even in more expensive movies, right? So I think they were okay.
Yeah, I thought they were pretty good.
Do they look like Neanderthals?
Krog kind of looked human to me, but Bach looked Neanderthal. I think that's just the heaviness of the brow. Mara looked Neanderthalish too, with the brow ridge, and there was something else that they did with her face. I'm not quite sure. Some kind of cheek thing.
I mean, it's almost a trick question, because it is very difficult to get us Homo sapiens to look like Neanderthals. Yeah, you can stick a brow ridge on, but then you also need to have the bigger nose, the flatter forehead, the barrel chest. There's only so far you can go with 70s prosthetics to make something look Neanderthal-like. And usually, as long as you can't see the joints of the brow ridge to the actual skin, then you're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem is probably hiding the chin, because the chin is such a dead giveaway for a modern human, and it's like so impossible to hide that. So yeah, there's only so much you can do with prosthetics, and especially because this is not a very big budget kids show, they are pretty good for what they are, especially for the 1970s.
Yeah. And they must have had some money, because, I don't think that Burgess Meredith would have been cheap to bring on for the voiceovers.
Yeah, it is Hanna-Barbera, right?
Yeah. I like how they did it in like a documentary type way.
Yeah.
It was an interesting way of having the narrator be there without it being, I don't know, too corny or disruptive, right?
Yeah, it didn't feel corny, like you said.
No.
Not a lot happened, but at least it didn't feel too long. I mean, it's only 20 minutes, but it didn't feel like you had to sort of fast forward it. You were almost expecting something interesting to happen. It never did, but you were at least expecting it.
But it had like that same thing that all kids shows have in the 70s, 80s, 90s, is the feel-good turnaround moment, right?
That's right, the moral center.
The moral center,
the chewy moral center.
Because it's the pilot, we should have watched more to see if it gets better. But I mean, if I had just stumbled upon this and watched that first episode and made it through it, I would not be inclined to keep watching more episodes.
Well, we watched this on the Internet Archive, so it's free to watch. I let mine autoplay a little bit longer after the episode was finished. So in the second episode, they're out hunting, and Korg accidentally kills a woodpecker. And after that, a bunch of bad stuff starts happening. And so the whole episode is about how primitive humans' religion was just superstition. And he thinks that it was a bad omen that he killed this woodpecker.
Like nowadays.
Yeah. And I imagine that the sort of accuracy that this show is supposed to have, to me, seems to be more big picture and less details, rather than getting all these little details in. It's about showing us what life was really like. And so in that episode, they're giving us a glimpse of what primitive religion was like, and how the narrator, Burgess Meredith, specifically says primitive humans were just superstitious or something like that. And so, they connect this bad stuff happening to the fact that he's accidentally killed a woodpecker, and that he has to atone for it by leaving the territory of the woodpecker on exile or something like that.
What species of woodpecker is it that he kills? That would be interesting.
I was just looking that up. It looks kind of like a downy woodpecker or a hairy woodpecker, which we have around here, but slightly different, the placement of the red spot. Okay. But I do what kind of woodpeckers are there in the old world? Are they totally different from the new world woodpeckers?
Yeah, I think so, mostly. So in the UK, we've got 3 woodpecker species, which is not that typical for Europe. I think there's more variation, but we've got greater spotted, lesser spotted, and green woodpecker, and I think that's it. I mean, you could count, we occasionally get wrynecks, which I think are part of the woodpecker family, but yeah, that's about it. So if it's not black and white or green, then yeah.
Well, it was a black and white woodpecker with a red spot on its head. I assume it was a local California woodpecker. In North America, the West Coast often has slightly different variations that we don't see everywhere else because they're blocked off by the Rocky Mountains. So it looked pretty similar to the ones we have in the center of the continent here, but slightly different. So I assume it's some sort of local California subspecies or species. In this episode, they're carrying spears. Ross, you described them as being hafted, but you didn't get a good look. I thought we were just looking at spears that were just sort of sharpened to a point and like fire hardened.
Yeah,
there were some of those for sure. I think in the earliest shots, though, it looked like there was a lithic with hafting, but I mean, I could be wrong.
I watched it on my phone, so I don't really know.
It's also a pretty low resolution video. I don't know what resolution we are watching this at, but you know,
I watched it without
like
my glasses
340p.
on my phone, so I just saw like vague colors.
So it's like about potato by potato.
We do see them using some sort of grinding or chopping stones later. The women folk, of course, because in this episode, pretty much the men characters have storylines, and the women, the mother and the daughter, I guess they are, just kind of sit in the cave and wait for everybody and chop vegetables. But in the second episode, we do see the mother using a lithic, which is a very nice lithic, but it does look like a pretty classic Acheulean hand axe.
Okay.
Which is...
so it's an antique.
Yeah. A little bit before Neanderthals. There's an industry called the Mousterian of the Acheulean tradition. And so Mousterian is the Neanderthal tool tradition. So there is sort of like this blending period where the Mousterian overlaps with the Acheulean. But at 70,000, I think we should be not using a lot of that Acheulean. And they should be smaller, too, because the Acheulean hand axes are pretty big. And the Neanderthal Mousterian tools were generally much smaller, like an inch or two long for the most part, right?
Just awkward pause. We've run out of things to say.
One more thing I thought we could talk about is disability in prehistory, because we have this blind character, or temporarily blind character, and I suppose, I mean, a head injury that's going to do enough, like a hard enough head injury to make you go blind might leave some evidence on the skull, but it was only temporary, so probably not. But we do have quite a bit of evidence of disability and injuries in Neanderthals, and of course, the one who always comes to mind, who we've mentioned all the time, is Shanidar 1, right?
Yeah.
And so Shanidar 1 was an old guy from Shanidar Cave in Iraq, and he would have been blind in one eye because of a head injury, which, you know, did enough damage to the skull that we can see it would have impacted his eye socket. He was also probably deaf in one ear. He very famously has an arm that seems to have been amputated. He had this sort of withered arm, which was either intentionally amputated or, you know, was sort of naturally amputated because of an injury or something. And he also had some deformities to his legs, which would have left him with a limp. And so he was in pretty rough shape by the time he died. And so we can see in this episode Neanderthals taking care of people who have injuries to help them, at least in this case, I mean, it's through violence. But by the end, the kid decides, no, we should continue to help him, right? For no real obvious reason. I'm not sure why the kid has this sort of about face and is like, oh no, we need to take care of this guy.
Maybe because he decided not to hurt him at the end? Like, they released him?
I guess so. Just because he's the main character and they're good guys, I guess.
Yeah, you can't teach kids to leave blind men.
That's what we need to
forest.
teach kids, is that when you're kidnapped by somebody, you should be sympathetic to your kidnapper.
Yeah. Keep going with them. Yeah.
I was just thinking when you're talking about kind of disability and illness in Neanderthals, there was a paper that came out a couple of years ago, I think, about how lots of Neanderthal skulls show signs of otitis.
Yeah.
Like swimmer's ear, which can be very painful and very debilitating. But I can't remember what the kind of take-home message from that work was. Was it that Neanderthals were capable of swimming, or was it that... What was the sort of main conclusion from that work? Anyone remember?
I don't. Was it that it was cold?
Yeah, I remember the paper, and I thought maybe the conclusion was that because they were living in a cold climate, it was just from the cold.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's usually cold water, right? That does it. And then
all right.
In the divers.
Well, I'll link that paper in the show notes, and if we don't figure it out right now, listeners can check out the paper.
Oh, I think I got it. So it's the structure of the tube of their inner ear is flat, like similar to modern human infants. And so they probably got chronic ear infections like modern human infants do. So that would cause the inflammation and the bone remodeling reaction. That makes sense. And also like cold and colds, like sinus infections and stuff all play into that.
Is there any evidence that Neanderthal sinuses were different from modern human sinuses?
They're larger.
Okay.
There's been work, especially focusing on the nose ones, but looking at the differences in Neanderthal and modern human sinuses, mostly in relation to explaining the difference in the nose.
Yeah, which has been in the news recently with the CT scanning of the Altamura man and looking at the turbinates there. So the Altamura man we mentioned before, but he's this like basically turned to stone skeleton inside a cave, Altamura cave, which I think is in Italy. Is that right? I think it's in Italy.
Altamira is in Spain? Is it Italy or Spain? I thought it was Spain.
I think it's Italy. But he's got flowstone, so like the stuff that forms stalactites and stalagmites is all over this skeleton and has sort of cemented it to the inside of the cave, so it can't be moved without damaging. But it's complete and intact, and so people have been in and scraped bits of away to get stuff for DNA samples, so it's been DNA sampled. They've also recently done these CT scans on it to x-ray the inside of the skull and see what's there, and the turbinates are preserved, which is very rare because those are really fragile bones that are in the inner nose. They're very vascularized, I think. They're what in modern humans kind of warms the air that you breathe in through your nose so that it doesn't shock your lungs when you take it into your lungs. So it's like a heat exchanger essentially, and it has that same kind of form, and that it's quite thin, quite flat, and helps to warm the air as it comes in. And the assumption has always been, I think, that Neanderthals, which we know had these huge noses based on the sort of size of their nasal aperture in the skull, we know that their noses were enormous. The thought was they'd also have huge turbinates because this nose was an adaptation to breathing in the cold air of the Pleistocene. But it turns out from the CT scans of Altamura that the turbinates aren't actually that different from modern humans. So it's kind of back to the drawing board as to why Neanderthals had such huge noses.
Maybe sexual selection.
Yeah, everyone loves a big hooter.
Yeah.
I'm mixing up, this is Altamura man in Italy, but I'm mixing it with Altamira cave in Spain, which has cave
totally
art.
Different.
Yep. I actually did my master's thesis on nasal cavity and stuff like this, and one of the crazy things I remember vaguely, because it wasn't directly related to the work I was doing, is that there's like some kind of like nitrous oxide that's produced in sinuses. And so there's some theory about larger sinuses producing more nitrous oxide, which when you breathe in goes into your lungs. And I don't remember what it's supposed to do. I remember this being like kind of vaguely...
I think it's a vasodilator, nitrous oxide. I think that's what its biological function is in humans and mammals. So that's why laughing gas, which is nitrous oxide, is effective, because it acts to kind of dilate your blood vessels and increase blood flow and make everything just a bit nicer.
So were Neanderthals just constantly high then? That's why they're flower children. Like it's just all leading back to that again. Kumbaya.
Naturally high.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't remember enough about this, and I'd have to look into it again. But that's one of the sort of fringier ideas about Neanderthal nasal cavity, nasal sinus evolution, is that larger sinuses would be a larger source for nitrous oxide, which serves some sort of natural function because sinuses do produce nitrous oxide, and there's some physiological, biological reason for that.
Yeah, I think nitrous. So a lot of the kind of prescription drugs that people take that produce nitrous oxide are to do with vasodilation. So if you have angina and you take, you essentially take, I think it's trinitrotoluene. So basically you take TNT if you have angina, because that gets converted in the body to produce nitrous oxide, which relaxes your coronary arteries. And also, I think the kind of end effect of Viagra is to produce nitrous oxide as well, to encourage vasodilation in particular areas.
Huh. So it really is like like flower children 60s Neanderthal cults. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm saying nitrous oxide, but I'm looking up a paper now that says nitric oxide.
Okay.
But it says it has the same similar effect. The discovery that the perinasal sinuses produce nitric oxide, a potent neurotransmitter with profound effects on the pulmonary vasculature and on tissue oxygenation. Tissue oxygenation, I think, might be the point there, because Neanderthals are very muscular. They're doing a lot of physical activity, hunting big game. And so maybe it has to do with oxygenation of the muscles or something like that.
Is that drug that kids are doing nowadays? They're huffing those little tin things, nitrous or whatever?
That's nitrous oxide. That's laughing gas. Yeah, nitrous oxide.
I just remember not knowing what it was, but when I moved to Liverpool, I just saw them on the ground all the time. And they were such frequency. I'm like, this must be drugs somehow. I don't know what it is, but like, there's no other reason why there'd be so much of it.
It's always a safe assumption in Liverpool.
Kim, when you started saying that, I thought for a second that you meant that the kids were lying on the ground all the time. And you're like, why are these kids lying on the ground? Must be drugs.
I'm just stepping over them.
I'm late for work. Get out of the way.
At the end of the episode, the narration says, Neanderthal man left no written records of his history, just some bones, tools, and burial mounds. This story is based on assumptions and theories drawn from those artifacts. And we can comment on that because, first of all, bones, yes. Tools, yes. Burial mounds? No, Neanderthals didn't make burial mounds.
Not that we found yet.
And this is pedantic, but it says the story is based on assumptions and theories drawn from those artifacts. Well, their bones are not artifacts. They're their own bones. The tools are artifacts. Burial mounds also are not artifacts, because we would call those archaeological features. The difference between an artifact and a feature is that an artifact is an object that was made by humans that you can sort of move out of the archaeological record, but a feature is something that's part of the landscape. So you can't dig up a burial mound and put that burial mound in a museum. The act of digging it up destroys it, right?
Well, I mean, the British Museum has definitely done that, for
yeah,
sure.
So, sure, you can move features into a museum if you have enough money.
And few enough scruples. You can do it, yeah.
Yeah, and you don't mind the destruction.
Yes. In general, a feature is something that's set in the landscape. So, like, the ruins of a building would be a feature. And yes, the British Museum can take the entire ruins of a building out of the ground and move it to England. But in general, something like that would be a feature and not an artifact.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like the burial mounds quote, I mean, this is the 70s, so it might have still been kind of influenced by the whole kind of bear cult and the kind of erroneous idea that bones were put in special kind of stone boxes in caves, like Drachenloch Cave in Germany and places like that, where actually those were environmental kind of repositionings, like from floods and cave roof fall-ins and things like that. They weren't human placements, but that might be explained by kind of thoughts at the time.
Yeah, that's something we talk about in this podcast a lot, is when we're watching something from the pretty distant past, from several decades ago, the state of our understanding of paleoanthropology would have been very different. So we have to understand how accurate this was relative to the time. And so for reference, this episode came out in 1974. That's the same year Lucy was found, the Australopithecus. And so before this time, there's so many fossils we don't have. There's so many different species we know of that we don't have. So we would have had Australopithecus, but we would have had such a small understanding of Australopithecus because Lucy, at the time it was found, was the most complete skeleton of an Australopithecus ever found. We had lots of Neanderthals by the 1970s, but still in that mid-20th century, the definition of a Neanderthal was a little less clear and a little more nebulous, because this is, before out of Africa, before, like, I don't know exactly because I wasn't even born yet, but like the multi-regional might have been more popular. So there still would have been a pretty significant debate in the 1970s about whether Neanderthals were our direct ancestors or a side branch of cousins as we understand them to be today. And so that's important to think about when we're looking at this, the context of this episode. I think the Jebel Irhoud fossils that we know as modern humans today, the earliest modern humans, I think have in the past been classified as Neanderthals at some times, right?
Yeah, quite possibly. And I guess also dating, like absolute dating, wasn't as good back then either.
Yeah, it had only existed for 25 years at this point, right?
And it wouldn't have been low volume AMS dating. It would have been bulk, sort of counting decaying bits of, like, in terms of hundreds of grams of material kind of stuff.
We've talked about the invention of carbon-14 dating before, which is around 1950. But of course, for 70,000 BC, that's just beyond the upper limit of radiocarbon dating, so they couldn't have used radiocarbon to get that date. The date is accurate, so I know about the invention of radiocarbon dating, but I don't know about the invention of any of the other radiometric dating techniques. So does anybody know about that? Was there sort of like a sequence of, we could do it with potassium, we could do it with uranium? Do you know about that? Or was it sort of like, we can do it with carbon, now we can do it with everything, right?
I think, I don't know for sure, but I think like the uranium and stuff, I feel like that was more in my life. So I think there was a gap, but I could be wrong.
I feel like during my lifetime and my career, there's been a shift but like adding on to the radiometric, like the techniques that use radiometric decay to techniques that use other stuff like the electron spin resonance, thermoluminescence, optically stimulated luminescence. Those are the ones that we are using at our sites much more. And then like other stuff like fluorine uptake or things like this that aren't based on radiometric decay, but are based on other types of radiation or particles or stuff.
I'm just looking, just as always, doing a quick kind of Wikipedia dive. So uranium thorium dating is from the 1960s, so that's just after radiocarbon. So yeah, it looks like it might just have been appropriately enough, a kind of chain reaction of once people did it with radiocarbon, they thought, well, what else can we find that might be useful?
What an exciting time to be a scientist, right?
Yeah, not finding any obvious dates, but yeah, it looks like it's, like you say, other methods have kind of stolen some of the thunder of radiocarbon, like ESR and TL and things like that.
Well, are we out of notes?
I think so. I mean, we've done the episodes now double the size of length of the TV show. So And my brain
Yeah, I
is
think so.
oatmeal. Like I just finished organizing a conference that we just had over the
Oh,
weekend.
wow.
And then also on the night in between, there was a street festival. And when they do this, they set the stage up immediately outside my house.
Oh, no. So
And it goes
not
on
only
all
were you-
night. I'm completely sleep deprived. And then it goes on all night, like to the point, like I can feel the bass in my shaking my bed. It sounds like the host is in my bedroom screaming at me in the microphone. And then
Ouch.
they always finish it off with like half an hour to an hour of firecrackers, which in a house full of cats, 3 a.m, it's just, So anyways, yes, so my brain is oatmeal.
Time for a nap.
I was asleep, woke up, watched the episode, came here, and I'll be asleep again shortly.
Before we sign off on this one, I wanted to mention this book that I just got.
Ooh.
Oh,
have you heard of this one?
No.
The Invention of Prehistory by Stefanos Geroulanos. He's a historian, but this book is basically outlining the history of the stuff that we talk about a lot in this show, which is that the way we depict the past is so much less about the past and so much more about our time period in which we are doing the depicting. And so whenever we watch a show from like the 70s or 80s, I'm always thinking about what did people at that time think about the past. And that's what this book is about. And it's all about, things we've talked about, how, the depiction of people in the past is very much about defining who we are today and who we are not, and often sort of equating the past with, violence that we've moved on from because we have evolved and progressed, and also with sort of equating non-Western peoples with previous stages of human evolution. So, we depict Native Americans or people in Africa as stuck in the Stone Age before Europe came and civilized them. And so it's talking about how the way we conceptualize prehistory is very often a tool for sort of justifying Western progress and oppressing non-Western peoples. And it's very interesting.
Yeah, sounds good. It's too late to put it on my Christmas list, though.
Yeah, especially because it's like January 20-something when this episode's coming out.
Well,
You can get it in the January sales.
All right, well, what are our final thoughts about Korg 70,000 BC? Are we going to go out and watch the rest of this series, which is pretty much all available on the Internet Archive?
I personally probably won't, but if you want just like a chill thing in the background, it's fine. There's nothing horrible about it.
Yeah, surprisingly progressive and sympathetic, I would say, especially for the 70s.
It's probably a good show to put on and fall asleep to.
Well,
yeah.
Bear in mind, it is a children's show. It did air on ABC during their Funshine Saturday block of children's programming.
Do Hanna-Barbera, do they make Yogi Bear?
Yeah. Do they make the Flintstones too, right?
Yeah, and Scooby-Doo, I think, too.
Yeah.
So maybe Yogi Bear was the bear that caused the hunter's blindness.
I'd love to see the Korg Jetsons crossover. Do you have questions, comments, or movie requests? We want to hear from you. Find us on Blue Sky and Facebook at SOTSA Podcast. Send us an email to screensofthestoneage@gmail.com or visit our website at screensofthestoneage.com.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.